this is I've got a collection of slides that just kind of show an overview of what we're trying to do for ham radio. And I've been doing ham radio equipment design since I was about 14. It took a long time for the technology to catch up to what I really wanted in radios. And what you're looking at right here, the KH1, is something that I've wanted since I first started hiking around and carrying small radios. And I will touch on various aspects of the KH1, but I'm just going to zip through pretty much an overview of the whole product line here. And again, I'm not here just to tell you what we do. I would really love to hear what you guys are interested in. If you have any Elecraft gear you got questions about, I'm your guy. We always have new stuff in the pipeline. I can talk about some of it. We have obviously a high power desktop product line, which is the K4 transceiver. And we've got a couple of different high powered amplifiers. And one of the newest things in our lineup is the K4/0. And that just means it's a kind of like a K4, except it doesn't put out any power, because what it is a remote control panel that has the same front panel as a K4, but it doesn't have any RF deck. You basically connect to the world, or connect to your server K4 someplace in the world over Ethernet. So I'll go into that. I'll talk a little bit about our current products in the QRP genre, which, by the way, when I lived in New England back in the 1980 timeframe, QRP was really big back then, and if anything, it seems like it's even bigger now with things like soda and all the home brew that goes on. So our response to that has been the KX2 and KX3, and then of course now we have the KX1, which is our miniature handheld radio, and then of course we've got some antennas too. Yeah. All right, so let's just I'm going to zip through some slides on the K4 and the KP1500. Here is a K4, and as you can see, you can't measure it, but it's 13.5 inches wide, which actually is quite a bit narrower than what you'd get if you took a K3 and put it side by side with our old P3 pan adapter. So the K4 brings in all the best features of the K3 and the P3, and a whole lot of new functionality as well. And as you can see, we've got a large, bright screen and spectral display. We can also do dual spectral display, and we can do text decode on both of the receivers simultaneously. It covers 160 through 6 meters. We got transverter band displays for guys who want the radio to read exactly what your 10 gigahertz transverter is actually operating on. And here's the back side. When we designed the K4, we tried to preserve all of the I/O from the K3 and then some. So you can see that we've got 4 antenna jacks and collection of USB and Ethernet interfaces. We've got wideband HDMI video. There's a reference input for people who want to be dead on frequency. And then all of the legacy line in and line out and audio connections as well. One thing contesters really like about the K4 is that we've got both front and rear panel microphone and speaker jack, or microphone and headphone jacks. And the RS-232 jack is good for controlling all your legacy devices like step IRs, etc. Or you can control things directly over USB or Ethernet. And I'll just mention that the K4 has a really rich programming remote control interface. So for those of you who like messing around with your own computer or software applications, or if you want to create your own switch functions on the front panel of the radio, we can do that with our really rich command set. It's well over 100 commands, it might be 200 commands at this point. And in fact, people are using that to create applications to use with the K4 when it's remote, so that you can get to it from a keyboard, a laptop or a pad or a phone. And so there are lots of new apps out there that are making use of our full remote control. And by the way, Elecraft's remote control does not depend on a centralized server. So there are some other companies that depend on a centralized server, and that means that when that server goes down, nobody can make any connections. So we avoided that. It's all direct peer-to-peer. You are controlling your K4 directly, and you can let other people control your K4 also, including more than one at a time if you'd like. Here's a screenshot from an interesting setup where we've got text decode working. You can see the text decode on the bottom end of the screen there. The RX section is receive text decode, and the transmit section shows what you're outputting. And the K4 also has 4 dedicated message buttons on it. So if you're an operator who likes to just tap a switch to play your DVR voice messages, or your CW or PSK31 or RS-232 messages, you can do that with dedicated switches on the front panel of the radio. Here's an example of the K4 with dual receive and dual pan adapters. So those pan adapters can be located anywhere on any band, and you can operate cross-band, you can monitor one band while you're operating on another one, etc. I want to call your attention to the lower left-hand corner of this screen. You'll notice that there's a couple of interesting icons there. The question mark icon, if you tap that, it takes you to our built-in owner's manual for the radio. And that means everything that you'd like to know, you can get out right from the front panel. And in fact, there's a cool function, which is the last control function. So let's say that you just did something on the radio and you're not quite sure what all of the implications of that control might be. For example, let's say that you tap the XIT switch and you want to know what that's all about. So if you then tap the question mark button, bring up the internal manual, and then hit the last control button, it'll take you right to the place in the operating manual that describes that control. That's really useful for learning the radio. Although the radio does come with a like a 45-page full-color introductory manual, and it's full color so that you can actually see exactly how to use it in tutorial style. And in fact, all the illustrations are the same size as the front panel of the radio itself, so it makes it quite easy to learn. This is our newest toy. It's the K4/0. And it's kind of hard to tell from this photograph, but it's exactly the same width as the K4 and the same height as the K4, but it's only 4 inches deep. So kind of like a toolbox or a lunch pail, and that's kind of appropriate because one of the things a lot of our customers do with the K40 is they take it out at lunchtime. So you got your lunch pail in one hand and your K40 in the other hand. It has a handle on the top, and it has exactly the same user interface as the K4. So you basically just turn it on, make sure the Wi-Fi antenna is connected in the back, or plug in an RS-232 interface, or hotspot it to your phone. You can use satellite, you can use cell networks, you can use hotel, private hotel networks. And so from any place in the world, from your back porch to your easy chair to someplace halfway around the world on your travels, you can log into your K4 or somebody else's K4. So one of the really fun things to do with all of this remote control stuff, which I didn't appreciate until we really got it going, was that you can basically log into somebody's K4, halfway across the world and see what DX sounds like from over there. And in fact, there are whole contests being run now where all of the participants who might be world-class contesters or DXers can be any place in the world, and they can all be using a collection of, multi-transmitter, K4 and amplifier and antenna installations at a multi contest station. And we've gotten the propagation delay down to as low as possible, given physics. You can't fool nature, but we can certainly work around it. Another device that we have that's really useful for the K4 is this K-Pod. And as you can see, it has 8 buttons on it. So this allows you to set up macros and then assign them to these switches. And that assignment can be done right at the radio itself. So you can fully program up to 8 different switches on the front panel of the radio. And you can also fully program, sorry, it's 13. There's 13 switches on the front panel of the radio that can be customized. And then you've got another 8 tap and hold functions here on the K-Pod. So for those who have particularly operating style, especially in the heat of a contest, you can get at everything you need to very quickly with the K-Pod as well as from the front panel. Well, the K-Pod, of course, also has I'm going to back up a second. K-Pod also has exactly the same 400 count optical encoder as the VFO encoder on the front panel of the radio. And actually the VFO-B and RIT encoders are also the same 400 count high quality optical encoders. If you look down at the low edge of that knob, you'll see there's a switch on the K-Pod that lets you assign the knob directly to VFO-A, VFO-B, or RIT. So these are all very useful functions for contesters in particular. And here's KPA 1500. It's a no frills operating. It's really an operator oriented amplifier. We don't make you dig through menus on a TFT screen. We got nice big bar graphs. All the stuff you need is there at a glance, and it's quite easy to operate. And of course, it's fully automated when it's connected to the radio. Works with a lot of other radios too. In fact, here it is with the K4. So we like to think of these as our twins. And the power supply, well, in order to keep the KPA 1500 desktop size like you see here and reasonably lightweight, we located the 60 volt power supply and all of its protection circuitry and its fans, etc., and in a separate box that you can place on the floor or behind the radios, wherever you want. All right, so before I go on with the KX line, I will be happy to take any questions. Stu, you want to just go ahead and interrupt me if it looks like somebody's about to raise their hand?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, feel free to stop me at any time. The equipment is cool. It's fun to design. Eric and I have always had this principle that if we design something that we really like, then we've kind of achieved our design goal, and especially if other people enjoy it too. But it's really interesting to know how you guys are using your equipment and what we might be able to do in the future with software-defined radios and amplifiers. So yeah, let your imaginations run wild and feel free to stop me at any time. Okay, so let's move on quickly here to the KX line. And Stu, before I get going here, can you tell me roughly how much time I have left?
You got about 20 minutes.
Okay, wow. Okay, so the KX line, all of our radios start with the letter K, and that's a joke that goes back all the way to the K2, where we wanted our first radio was a QRP radio, but and we wanted to call it the K2, but the joke is that I thought of it because of the Henry 2K, which of course is a monstrous amplifier, and K2 is actually a mountain peak that's the second highest mountain in the world. So our K2 was our original product, and then we decided to create a line for what we call extreme operation, where you're pretty much operating from anywhere, and that's where the X comes from. So this is a KX2, which is our medium-sized QRP rig. It's about 5.5 inches wide and 2.5 to 3 inches tall and about 1.25 inches deep. And it has the same display on it as the K3. So it's a very large, very readable display, puts out 15 watts on, 12 watts on 80 through 10 meters. And what's cool about the KX2 is it has almost all the same DSP features as your desktop radios, including text decode and noise reduction, noise blanking, audio peaking filter, automatic and manual notch filtering. It does dual VFOs and split. It'll scan. So it's pretty much a desktop radio that weighs 13 ounces. Has a very large internal lithium-ion battery, which is, I think it's 2.5 amp hours and 11 volts. And that will power this rig for quite a while for, field testing, field day, or for being out in the sticks on your QRP adventures. As you can see, you can plug a mic into it, but there's also a built-in mic. In fact, you can use a KX2 handheld like an HT, and I'll show you that in a second. So here's me holding a KX2 just to give you an idea of how small it really is. And my hands are not huge. That's why they made me play viola in high school instead of cello, because my hands weren't big enough. So I ended up like doing viola for a few years and then switched to guitar for the same reason. But here's what a KX2 looks like in my hand. Oh, should mention that keyer paddle can be detached. So if you're not a CW guy, you can detach the keyer paddle and just use sideband, AM, FM. It does full repeater control, by the way. And one thing that's really fun with a KX2 is to go out and activate 10-meter repeaters when the conditions are good. I can hit repeaters on the East Coast from over here directly on 10 meters, 10 meter FM. So that's fun. And I'll also mention that keyer paddle, even though you're doing the entry in CW mode only, of course, and it displays what you're sending, a nice feature of all of our radios is that if you happen to put it into RTTY mode or PSK31 mode, when you send CW with the keyer paddle, it will convert it to RTTY or PSK31. And so the station at the other end just thinks you're using a laptop and sending RTTY or PSK31. And so that's a lot of fun because you can actually get on the air and you can work an entire RTTY contest with the KX2 handheld while you're walking through the park. That was one of my specific criteria for the radio. I wanted to be able to use it on all those conversational modes with a whip antenna, and I'll show more examples of that as we go along. So here's KX2 sitting on a log. The headphone that you see plugged in there, that's actually an Apple headset. And I've got a splitter attached to it so that I can use the mic on the lanyard and the headset and just plug it directly into the KX2's mic and headphone jacks. Makes for a very compact sideband station. And of course we got the keyer paddle plugged in, and that is an AX1 Elecraft antenna. You can see it includes a little bipod there so that it can be stabilized. And in fact, the antenna helps stabilize the radio when the bipod is in use. That antenna, by the way, is dual band, 17 and 20 meters. Here's a comparison between the KX2 and KX3. As you can see, the KX3 is larger. It has all the same features as the KX2, plus it also does up to 15 watts output, and it has somewhat better performance. It also includes a 160 meters, 6 meters, and there's an optional 2-meter internal transverter. And this is the KX3 shown with its companion pan adapter, the PX3. PX3 is actually a pretty hot little pan adapter. It has a lot of laboratory grade functionality to it. And most people leave the PX3 at home when they're taking the KX3 out to a lunchtime de-expedition. So it's kind of a chameleon in that regard. You don't really need to bring it unless you need it. Here is a portable amplifier that we supply as an option for the KX2 and KX3 and other QRP rigs. Again, big, bright LED bar graphs right where the action is. And some people will stick a KXPA 100 in the trunk. put a KX2 or KX3 on the dashboard. So let's talk briefly about our newest radio, which is the KH1. And again, this is a new product line with H for handheld. And just out of curiosity, has anybody tried, besides me, anybody in the room ever try operating out in the field with a QRP rig handheld? Or you guys all dyed in the wool home station? Well, I'm going to try and convince you that you should get out there and try operating in the field, handheld or sitting at a picnic table. I mean, I think Elecraft's customers are going to live an average of about 5 or 10 years longer than everybody else, because even our 80-year-old customers are out there bagging a couple of peaks a day in some cases, and taking these rigs out on soda and parks on the air activations. So getting outdoors is a big part of Elecraft's ethic. And so we help you when you're both in the shack and you're outdoors. So let's just zip through this so you can see what I'm talking about. So there I am operating a KX2 handheld with the whip, and I'm overlooking a distant view of San Francisco there. You can pretty much, so I like this quote from Adrian Weiss, who is a guy I met when I was living on the East Coast. If there is a place and you can get to it, you must operate from there. Kind of a tautology, but in any case, this is something that I definitely believe in. It typically I'll stick the KH1 in my back pocket and just wherever I happen to be, pull it out and make some contacts. So the KH1 is really intended to be invisible. But not really invisible, but so small that the rig and all of the accessories are down to something like 9 ounces and will basically fit in your pocket. Why handheld? If anybody's been out in the field, has encountered this phenomenon where you can't really find a place to sit. And there's a long list of things that contribute to that phenomenon. Why CW for the KH1? So obviously CW has a much higher signal noise ratio than sideband. So if you're operating handheld with conversational interaction with people, then CW gives you a huge signal noise advantage. And QRPDX, absolutely. The guys taking the KH1 out, including me, routinely make contacts from North America to Europe, to Japan. I have worked Australia sitting in my back patio with a KH1, a 4-foot whip, and a beer. Now, so my inspiration for the KH1 was this thing called a Micro Mountaineer built by W7ZOI, Wes Hayward. Wes Hayward is a friend of mine, and he's been a mentor. Here's his picture from 1970 of a Micro Mountaineer, which I built. It was the first thing I ever built. KX2 is actually about the same size as the Micro Mountaineer, but whereas the Micro Mountaineer covers 40 meters at half a watt out with crystal control, obviously the KX2 is all bands, all modes, with a very wide range automatic antenna tuner and everything built in. Here's my son Griffin operating a KX2 at 9,000 feet in the Sierras. Here's KH1, which is the answer to the question, how do you get a radio that's even smaller than a KX2 and attach the logbook? So this was some interesting low-tech design, figuring out how to put an attachable keyboard tray onto the radio and attach a ballpoint pin, as you can see there. And those log sheets, there's a stack of them, and you can make up to about 120 QSOs on those log sheets before you have to change the sheets. The radio also does internal logging to double EEPROM. And so everything you send with the keyer paddle gets logged, if you want to the internal code base up to 50,000 characters. And when you get back from your trips, you can dump it to a computer. Here's another example of how small the KH1 is. There it is with a garden variety iPhone. It's actually a little smaller. You can see the whip antenna is clipped onto the right side. Keyer paddle clips on down at the bottom. And the KH1 has a built-in whip antenna base loading coil for 17, 15, and 20 meters. So you don't even need to carry a supplemental antenna around with you. So it's shaped like an HT, operates like an HT, paddle plugs in down there between the knobs. And as you can see, it's really small. Even with the battery, which by the way is the same size battery as the one in the KH2 or KX2, it still only weighs 12 ounces, which is pretty much like a very light HT. Here's an X-ray view of the KH1. This is a hint that we do everything virtually 100% of it's 3D modeled before we build it. And here's an X-ray view that shows that this thing is pretty much all battery pack. Here is the display of the KH1, various custom icons for things like the automatic antenna tuner. By the way, the automatic antenna tuner in the KH1 is only 3/4 of an inch by 2 inches by 1/4 of an inch. It is probably the world's smallest wide range automatic antenna tuner. And it allows you to use whips or dipoles, inverted Vs, any kind of random length antenna. Here again is the log tray with the pin. And the log tray slides back in and clips over the top of the radio. And as you can see, the keyer paddle has now been flipped upside down and it's now stored between those two knobs. So it's very well protected for transport. And you can actually operate the radio with the log tray closed. So if you find yourself in a downpour, you've still got your VFO control, your keyer paddle, and your AF gain control. And basically, that's all Marconi needed. Here we go with another look at the KH1, just reminding you that it has a built-in loading coil for 17, 20, and 15 meters. And the auto tuner that's built in works with the BNC and the whip. There's also a BNC jack on the radio, so you can connect BNC fed or coaxial fed antennas in addition to screwing the whip onto the top of the antenna. And there you can get a look at the ground post and the antenna switch. Or sorry, that switch is for selecting which inductance you want to use for the internal loading coil. If you're using a KH1 on a picnic table, you can add our KHRA1 right angle whip mount adapter. Whole thing folds up, folds flat when you're using it on the bench, and as you can see, that converts your whip to a 90-degree tabletop whip. And this is what it looks like when it's all folded up, although those are false colors, obviously. Real quickly, I mentioned 3D modeling. So we use 3D modeling, 3D printing for many of our production assemblies, and also, of course, for prototyping all kinds of different things. And 3D modeling has really come a long way. Here, for example, is the lower bottom panel of the KH1, and as you can see, the speaker is integrated into this piece, as well as an Allen wrench for adjusting the keyer paddle, which you can get to when you open the battery compartment. And also that sort of shiny thing on the left, to the left of the Allen wrench, that is a spare 440 nut in case you ever lose your thumb nut on the ground screw. So we didn't waste a single cubic centimeter inside this radio. This is a 3D model view of the keyer paddle, the log tray. And you see the things that are shown as red here, those are the slide-in rail clips, which allow you to slide the rail out. So you see the log sheets there. They are stuffed into a stack, and the way you get those in with one hand is, you see there are some indentations on the long right edge of the log tray. Those indentations allow you to just dip a corner of a log sheet in and slide it in underneath the stack. So it solves a very difficult but low-tech problem, which is how do you change log sheets with one hand in the field? Here's the custom carrying case that comes with the KH1. Again, it was fully 3D modeled before we sent it off to be fabricated. Lots of D-clips, carabiners, and Velcro clips so that you can attach to your pack or your body, etc. All right, antennas. We do a lot with portable antennas. Now, here is the kind of antenna configuration that, it works well, but it takes quite a while to set up. That is WG0AT, Steve, otherwise known as the Goat Man, because he uses pack goats to get all of his equipment up to the top of the mountain. So there's Steve using a little radio and an antenna at probably 10,000 feet. But this photo is like 20 years old at this point. And here's another example of a portable antenna that's kind of a pain. This is an 8-foot whip attached to the back of one of our Canadian friends doing HF pack. But Elecraft's philosophy with portable antennas is make them small, because when the band is open, you can actually work the world on a 4-foot whip. Oh, so yeah, so you can see the AX1 loading coil there, and then we have a miniature one called the AX2, which is 20 meters, or any band of your choice between 40 and 6 meters. And we have a new antenna, which is the AX3. This is our tabletop whip that has a built-in tripod. All the pieces break down to 6 inches long, so they fit into our smallest bags, including that KH1 bag that I showed you earlier. And the AX3 has covers a very wide range. It covers 30, 20, 17, 15, 12, and 10 meters. And in order to do that and still handle 50 watts, we used very, very high current tip jacks. Instead of trying to do this with a rotary switch or a slide switch or a toggle switch, I cannot tell you how many conventional switches I managed to fry at 50 watts, because sometimes the impedance will be very low. You'll have extremely high current at low impedance with some matches. And so instead I designed this thing called a band select block. And you can see the pin plugs on the left. Those are 30 amp pin plugs that will only heat 1 degree C at 50 watts. So you basically, as you can see in this image, to change bands, you pull out the pin block, you rotate it, it has 4 separate positions, you rotate it and plug it in. So it's a very rugged, very high current solution to how to switch inductances inside an antenna at high power. All right, so just a little bit of wisdom about how to make contacts with low power and a whip. Well, you want to always use a counterpoise wire. You definitely want to work the loud stations first and get on during contests. That is the time when you're going to find lots of activity. CWT, I mean, when the ARL DX competition comes around, the bands, especially CW bands, wall-to-wall CW, which you can work with these small handheld radios with a 4-foot whip. And in fact, the AX3 tabletop whip that I showed you there, when I first took that thing out to test the prototype, I was sitting at a park bench about 2 miles from my house, and I put the 4-foot whip on. I went up on 10 meters, and with one call, I got the only station I heard on the band, which was a guy in the Philippines. That's over 7,000 miles, and at the time, my batteries were run down, so I was running 2 watts at a solid QSO with the Philippines with a 4-foot whip and 2 watts. And guys, it doesn't get any better than that. Now, I showed you an earlier picture of Steve, WG0AT, from at least 20 years ago. He was the guy on the mountaintop with that elaborate whip antenna and all the guy wires. Here's Steve operating the very first production KH1 that came off the production line. I hand delivered it to him. He came out to visit Santa Cruz, and Steve takes his radio out and operates pretty much every day that he can. And the very first day that he got it, he said, he was all excited. He said, "Wayne, I can make a QSO while my wife's in the bathroom." This is my son Griffin operating a KH1, a place we call Lizard Rock. This is up in Edgewood Park, and we named the package, the KH1 package collection, which includes all of the accessories. We named it the Edgewood package after this park. And there we go. You've seen the AX line, the KH line, the KX line, and the K4. And those are the elements of Elecraft. Apologies to the inventors of the periodic table of elements. So that is pretty much all I have planned. I'm going to try an experiment here, though. I alluded to the fact that we're always doing interesting things. We got stuff in the pipeline. So you've seen the K40 that's coming along. I'm going to do an experiment here and see if I can play you a couple of audio samples from some new noise reduction algorithms that we are planning to get into the K4. K4, of course, is a software-defined radio, and it has pretty nice noise reduction already. It's the same noise reduction that we use in the K3, but we're working on a new one, and you guys are going to be the first to hear my latest efforts on this. So I'm going to pull up, let me see, I may have to quit out of PowerPoint first. Okay, now let's see if it's going to let me run QuickTime. Okay, so I'm gonna play some audio here. You guys let me know if you can hear this. I'm not entirely sure how this works, but it's a good experiment. All right, so I'm going to play an audio file, a 10-second snippet of some really noisy sideband. CQ, CQ, CQ. First of all, are you guys hearing that okay?
Yeah.
All right, so let's just listen to this whole file. It's only 10 seconds. CQ, CQ, CQ. This is November 6, Kilo Romeo, calling CQ 20 meters and listening. So that's pretty much your garden variety frying pan type static and atmospheric noise. And here it is run through the new noise reduction algorithm that we've been playing with recently. CQ, CQ, CQ. This is November 6, Kilo Romeo, calling CQ 20 meters and listening. So that's a current iteration of one algorithm we've been playing with. Let me play you one other file. This is an extremely noisy sideband recording. You'll be able to just barely hear me in there. And again, this is with no noise reduction. So raise your hand if you were actually hearing my CQ down there in the noise. You hearing it? All right, you guys got good ears. So the algorithm even works on that kind of stuff, and it's really a challenge to get spectral subtraction noise reduction to work with such a low signal noise ratio, but we can even pull that out of the mud. So here's what that sounds like with the noise reduction on. CQ, CQ, CQ. This is November 6, Kilo Romeo. So this is a good start. Like I said, we hope to be integrating this into the radio for the next beta release. We do periodic releases with new features, and the most recent release includes full support for the K40 and all of that nice remote control software that I was talking about. So so there you have it. You guys are the only people besides my staff who have actually heard these audio recordings. And if you have any feedback for me on that, either now or later, you can email me. I'm just Wayne at Elecraft.com or N6KR at Elecraft.com. And I'll be happy to field any questions that you might have. And back to you, Stu. And thanks for being such an attentive audience. Thanks for moving all the way to the front rows to accommodate the audio challenges today. Appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We ran over by a little bit, so we've got Mark waiting in the wings here. But does anybody have a quick question for Wayne while we have him? No? I have a quick question. When's KX3 V2 coming out?
V2? I haven't heard about that. So, if I do hear anything about it, I'll let you know.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks for sticking with us, Wayne. We appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for wrestling the hardware there, Stu. Take care and say hi to Mitch for me.
I will definitely.
All right. Bye, guys.